Hi, I'm Andy, this is Really Random Reads, and today some thoughts on this book, The Warden by Anthony Trollope. So this book first, I was going to say this book first came into my life, but that sounds incredibly dramatic. Basically, I first got hold of a copy of this book and found out about this writer when my downstairs neighbour was looking to downsize her book collection, and she basically gave me the pick of anything that I wanted. Except it was a bit more than that with this one, because she went out of her way to recommend it to me. And although this is something I would have probably picked up anyway, her passion for it really came through and left me thinking, I really want to read that. Which makes it sound a bit weird when I now tell you that it sat on the shelf for 3 years, but I moved and then I didn't get around to reading this until I saw some videos about it on BookTube that were really passionate about it and left me thinking, I want to go away and read this. So what's it about? And I won't say too much here because in terms of the types of videos I don't like it where it gets too much into plot. I like to discover that for myself. But you have a man, a vicar, and he is our protagonist. He's responsible for administrating a charitable trust, a sum of money that's been left many, many years ago for the person in his position to, in Victorian terms, look after 12 people who've fallen on hard times. These have been sort of like what were then referred to, I suppose, as working men who'd had injuries or otherwise fallen into difficulties, and they live with the vicar and he's responsible for seeing to their well-being. However, he gets, and I don't think this is too much in dispute, he gets paid a lot more than he should for doing that role. Doesn't realise at first, it's brought to his attention, and this book is about his crisis of conscience. Things that I liked about it. So there was a lot. I liked that he wasn't, no one in this book is painted as either fully good or fully bad. They are complicated characters. Even the antagonist in this book, the actual author uses the narrative voice to go out of their way and tell you that, hey, this guy isn't a complete bastard. These are the things that maybe I haven't done justice to about why he is a human being. Other things that I liked, this will make me sound stupid. I read Hamlet when I was a teenager, and I read it since. But particularly on that first reading, I was surprised afterwards to learn the popular notion, which is true, that it's a play about indecision. That didn't come across strongly to me at all on the first reading. When I read this book, I thought, aha, here's a book, and a book done well, that is about indecision. It's also about loneliness, isolation, things that I think are really hard to write about and convey in an engaging sense without being boring. It can be really difficult, I think, in writing to have a character on their own without it just wanting to make you fall asleep. But there's particularly scenes towards the end of this book where the main character goes to London, where I thought that was really effective and done really well. Other things I liked in this book. So now, modern times, we might talk about somebody being cancelled. In this book, one of the sort of driving threats to the protagonist is, in my view, my interpretation, the threat of their being cancelled. And if I've got that wrong, if it's not, then at least the threat of the entire community and arguably the nation hating them. And that, I thought that was really interesting, and one of the things that makes this book perhaps still relevant. Other things to say under things I liked. You know what, maybe that's enough so far. He does law really well though, if you're interested in the legal world, particularly the Victorian legal world, really makes that breathe and come to life. Things that I didn't like so much. When I was at school, I remember reading some books by Thomas Hardy, and a teacher said to me, oh God, Far From the Madding Crowd, hate it. I like this teacher, like they just talk to you straight. He said, oh yeah, there's 5 pages in that book, he just talks about wellies, as in Wellington boots, just describing them, and it's boring. And I went away and read Far From the Madding Crowd, mainly because I wanted to see this 5 pages where he just talks about wellies, and it didn't have that. And she kind of told me she meant that in jest, which maybe makes me sound very naive. But when I read this, and this is a short book, okay? It's like 200 or something pages. But there is a bit in there at the beginning where one of the characters, I can't remember whether it's the protagonist or not, but they go to London for the first time. And there's like 3 pages where it's just description. It's introducing the newspaper, I've remembered now. And for me, it dragged. And there's bits like that where something that I think is typical of Victorian fiction that you get sometimes, particularly when, sometimes they're kind of paid by the word and things like that. And you just think, come on, just get on with it. So there's a little bit of that, but look, this is a 200-page book and there's not much. The main thing for me, the thing that I saw as a major flaw in it, and that I couldn't look past, although I still enjoyed this book and would recommend it and want to read other parts of Trollope. This is a series of the Barchester Chronicles. It's 4 more books, I believe. Still going to read them. But the bit that I can look past is the author and their view. You can tell I haven't done this before because that was literally the camera falling off. It's a really dramatic moment for it to do that. But the bit that I couldn't look past is, and I'm not going to give away any spoilers here, I'm going to try and talk about this in general terms. In terms of the 12 people who are the beneficiaries, or meant to be the beneficiaries of this charity, the 12 working class people who've fallen on hard times, the way the author leaves you with it is that the author and the narrative voice and the book, and if there's a message, kind of, I suppose the message is clearly of the belief that you have this Victorian paternalistic view of how people in that situation should be looked after, that they have a master, which is a word that's used, and hopefully that master is also their friend, which just kind of doesn't work. And you would have a good sort of paternal master, a good friend to look after these people in, as I guess as the Victorians saw it, the best tradition of Victorian philanthropy, rather than the way that we would think of these things probably today. Now, this was a book that was written back then. I'm not going to judge it by modern standards, which I just did, didn't I? And partly it's because my background is working in homelessness for a long time. But putting that aside, I think what I was looking for, the reason I was disappointed, and this was an unrealistic expectation, I hoped that the depiction of those characters would kind of have the same narrative treatment as something like a book from the start of the 20th century, The Ragged-Trousered Philanthropists by Robert Tressel. Whereas what happens is those characters, for my money, are the only ones in the book who come over kind of like two-dimensional, a bit like maybe this is overstating it, but a bit like the author is looking at some animals in a zoo and trying to describe them. It just felt like he fell down there and wasn't able a chance missed. But maybe this book, combined with The Ragged-Trousered Philanthropists, is just a ridiculous expectation. So, anyway, recommend. Lots of good things to take away. I will definitely be reading more Trollope, and there's some thoughts for you on this book. Thanks for watching.